The entire nation has had opportunity after opportunity to listen to people of color and to stop things like this from happening for years. We have absolutely no moral high ground to criticize public outcries like this when it was our failure to stand up for and protect our brothers and sisters by demanding more from public servants that led to these outcries in the first place. What's up everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Ryan Becker and every week I drop a new video where I talk about absurd issues in religion, culture, and society. If you're new here, click that subscribe button, click the bell icon so you can be the first to know when I post a new video, and give this video a thumbs up to help me grow the channel. And make sure to stay until the end for a little treat to make your day a bit brighter. Today's absurdity: the George Floyd tragedy. According to Minneapolis police, the encounter between Floyd and officers happened just after 8 p.m. Monday, when police were called on a report of a man attempting to use forged documents at a store. Officers found Floyd in a car at the scene. He appeared intoxicated, they say, and officers ordered him to get out of the car. Here's a quote from them. After he got out of the car, he physically resisted officers, police spokesperson John Elder told reporters early on Tuesday. Officers were able to get the suspect into handcuffs, and officers noticed that the man was going into medical distress. There's a 9-minute video that's been circulating, which shows a white officer pressing his knee into Floyd's neck behind a squad car for over 4 minutes. While lying face down on the road, Floyd repeatedly groans and says he can't breathe. Protesters and those filming are also begging the police to stop and let him go. After about 5 minutes, Floyd stops moving and appears unconscious. The officer on Floyd's neck does not lift his knee until medical personnel arrive and carry him to an ambulance. The video itself is hard to watch, and I think this is the first case where I've seen even many right-wing media companies and right-wing people admitting that there really is no justification here. The video has now surfaced that shows the moment that police initiated the confrontation and had George Floyd get out of the car. What's surprising to no one? Floyd didn't actually resist arrest at all. This wasn't one officer surrounded by 4 suspects. This was 4 officers and 1 suspect. 2 held him down, 1 put his knee on George Floyd's neck, and 1 stood by and watched. In addition, in official statements, the police tried to mislead the public by stating that Floyd resisted arrest, as if he somehow deserved to die. Which brings me to my next point. Just like Ahmaud Arbery, Philando Castile, and so many others, George Floyd did not deserve to die. Even if he was guilty of whatever crimes, he deserved a court of law and due process, not death by suffocation by the very police force that's supposed to protect him. What we are witnessing more and more in these cases is that the police are more interested in protecting one another than they are about protecting citizens. Ahmaud Arbery's case was buried until video evidence surfaced months later. At the scene, a police officer was actually going to arrest the McMichaels and was told no and to let them go by the DA's office. The burying started within minutes of Arbery's death. Many have said that those filming didn't do enough to stop it. Their pleas and video didn't do anything to stop the man's death. But what were they supposed to do? The officer has a gun, taser, and other officers there to protect him. The most citizens can do is record and plead with the officers to stop, else they risk the same fate or being arrested or attacked themselves. There's no physical intervening here, unless someone is willing to risk their life and their safety for George Floyd. These officers were able to kill this man in broad daylight and in public, and nothing could be done to stop it, except if the other police officers present had chosen to. Had someone intervened and stopped this and had been arrested for it, even with everything on camera, it's entirely possible the cop wouldn't have actually been charged for anything or fired, as he would have been stopped before he committed the crime. So the video likely wouldn't exonerate the ones who intervened, since at that point they're just interfering with an arrest. If police have gotten off the hook for actually killing people, and they've been willing to lie and misrepresent the situation, what makes us think they wouldn't get off the hook for less? But Ryan, this isn't the majority of cops, it's just a few bad ones. None of this has ever been about the cops who do their job. This is about the cops who don't, and the good cops who enable corrupt and racist officers by never addressing them or reporting them. I've heard people reference recent moments in history like the shooting of Walter Scott, where the officer who killed Walter was arrested and convicted on second-degree murder charges. These people say that we don't give enough credit there, that we don't celebrate when justice is done. That's because we shouldn't have to have some big fanfare and parade whenever the justice system actually performs its basic functions and meets basic expectations. We don't throw a party every time a coworker shows up on time, but we know that we would get in trouble if we kept showing up an hour late every day. So good. The officer who murdered Walter Scott got convicted of second-degree murder. You know what would be better? If Walter Scott was still alive and the officer did his job correctly in the first place. There is another important point that we need to address: the inherent and immediate double standard in how black people are treated and white people are treated by police officers. In the last 2 months, we have seen several photos of white people gathering in anti-lockdown protests, screaming in the faces of police officers, brandishing weapons meant to intimidate and say what you want, showing up in military-style vehicles with loaded weapons and military clothes sends no other message than that we will fight over this. Nothing happened to them. Situations weren't escalated, no one was killed, and no one was arrested. George Floyd had a possibly fraudulent check. He appeared intoxicated, and he did not resist arrest. And that somehow warrants 3 officers holding him down, with 1 officer putting his entire body weight on Floyd's neck, while a 4th just stands back and lets it all happen. Anti-lockdown protesters in several states have openly stated that violence is not off the table for them, and that they are willing to kill. Trump just this week retweeted a video of a man who said that the best Democrat is a dead Democrat, which was received with applause and cheers by the crowd before he tried to clarify that he didn't mean physically, but politically. The man in the video that Trump tweeted, while trying to clarify his statements in a later interview, is the very same one who claimed that violence is still on the table. We've seen similar statements made in other states as well. Anti-lockdown protesters have been allowed to brandish loaded weapons in an effort to intimidate with zero resistance or objection. But Ahmaud Arbery defends himself when chased down and blocked off by white men, or George Floyd is killed by police because of a bad check and appearing intoxicated. I cannot fathom the amount of cognitive dissonance it takes for anyone to not see how the deck is stacked. George Floyd is unjustly killed in the street by police in broad daylight. And Trump's first words on the matter don't come until Wednesday night, when he tells us that he asked the Department of Justice and the FBI to expedite an investigation into the very sad and tragic death of George Floyd. That's right. The president's big response to George Floyd was asking the FBI to do something that they were already doing. Before Friday, only that tweet and 1 other contain a reference to Floyd. The second tweet came Thursday night while calling protesters thugs and referencing a 1967 Miami police chief statement that threatened violence and had warned, "We don't mind being accused of police brutality. They haven't seen anything yet." President Trump has responded much more harshly to looting than to murder. In fact, he is now claiming strong National Guard action in Minneapolis is being done to honor George Floyd's memory. You heard that right. George Floyd's memory is now being used to justify U.S. military action against its own citizens. Beyond that, he has focused his entire week on celebrating the U.S. Department of Transportation budget commitments and using his entire platform as a president to attack Twitter and social media. The president of the U.S. is more upset that a private company fact-checked him on their own private online platform than he is that an American was unjustly killed in the street. And for all his talk about how Twitter might be threatening free speech, he hasn't said a word about Minnesota State Police arresting CNN correspondent Omar Jimenez and his team while they were live on the air early Friday morning. They were released from police custody over an hour later, not because President Trump defended the media, but because of CNN CEO calling the Minnesota governor himself. Within hours, Trump was publicly attacking Twitter, and within days he had a legally questionable executive order signed. But when it comes to actual assault on free speech, he has remained silent so far. But wait, there's more. We can also reference a Mississippi mayor, Hal Marks, who said, and I quote, "If you are talking about the incident in Minnesota, I didn't see anything unreasonable. If you can say you can't breathe, you're breathing. Most likely that man died of overdose or heart attack. Video doesn't show his resistance that got him in that position, police being crucified." Even though, as we already established, neither video released of the incident shows Floyd actively resisting any arrest. Unless we want to say that anything short of, "Please, yes, officer, arrest me, I would love to wear your handcuffs," now qualifies as resisting arrest. Marks perpetuates harmful stereotypes, assuming the worst of Floyd and making assertions about his lifestyle with no evidence. Not to mention, he is now claiming the public response calling for him to step down as mob mentality. I fail to see how Americans holding their leaders accountable for their racist attitudes and actions is mob mentality in the slightest, and it should be a giant red flag when political expression is dismissed as mob mentality. Now let's address the catch-22 that those protesting police brutality find themselves in. Colin Kaepernick takes a knee in 2016 to protest police brutality, and people respond with, "That's not the right place or time or method." When protesters take to the street, they are told it's not the right place or time because they block traffic and otherwise inconvenience people. In 2020, while a man is being killed in front of them, people protest nonviolently, shout and beg for the police to stop what they are doing. The man dies anyway. They non-violently protested at arguably the most right place and time while it was happening, and it couldn't save George Floyd's life. Now, protests have turned to riots, and people are saying that the riots aren't appropriate either. So let me get this straight. A black person can't non-violently protest in the streets. A black person can't use their personal platform and notoriety to call attention to an important issue. A black person can't violently protest. And if a black person protests in the most appropriate situation to do so, it didn't make a difference. George Floyd still died. If every single form of expression is deemed inappropriate, and at best still results in the death of a black man because of police brutality, then the message being sent is clear. White convenience matters more than black lives. Many white people will gladly say that black people matter because all lives matter, but the second a black person uses their platform in a way that even so much as mildly inconveniences a white person's day, it's deemed rebellious, inappropriate, disrespectful, anti-American, unpatriotic, and criminal. If someone is going to be labeled a criminal and disrespectful no matter what they do, then it shouldn't surprise us when that someone resorts to violence if the result is going to be the same anyway. I'm not advocating for or condoning violence, but I am saying that it shouldn't surprise us when things escalate to this point. The entire nation has had opportunity after opportunity to listen to people of color and to stop things like this from happening for years. We have absolutely no moral high ground to criticize public outcries like this when it was our failure to stand up for and protect our brothers and sisters by demanding more from public servants that led to these outcries in the first place. And none of that even begins to address the fact that there are more people decrying the protests than there are the unjust death of a black man at the hands of police. In fact, America has expressed more outrage over the last decade over protests of unjust deaths than toward the unjust deaths themselves. If that isn't evidence enough of our failure to protect people and prioritize justice, I don't know what is. There are those who claim that none of this would have happened if black people would exercise their Second Amendment rights and have armed protests, except that history has already proved that notion wrong. In the 1960s, Black Panthers open-carried weapons in the streets and eventually into the Capitol building in California, in protest of racial injustice. They were perfectly within their rights at the time and had done nothing illegal. Sound familiar? The Panthers were removed by state police and taken into custody. One officer assured reporters that the Panthers were not under arrest and that this was only a precautionary measure to check them all out and check out all these weapons. In reality, the Panthers were charged with a variety of offenses, including conspiracy to disrupt a legislative session. In response to this, the Mulford Act was passed in 1967 in California and signed by Ronald Reagan. The Mulford Act banned the open carry of loaded firearms and banned them from the state capitol. In 1968, the Gun Control Act even more tightly regulated firearms sales and restricted the sales of Saturday night specials, which included a pocket pistol that was popular among black communities. And the real shocker? The NRA backed both of these regulations. In 2020, leadership of the NRA has come out in full support of the armed protests that are happening in the Capitol buildings in Michigan and other states. They encourage them and join in themselves. The message is clear. White people can do this, but black people can't. But Ryan, these men did nothing wrong. They didn't fire their weapons, they just carried them. In Michigan, under state statute, brandishing a weapon is defined as to point, wave about, or display in a threatening manner with the intent to induce fear in another person. Comments made both before and after armed protests have openly admitted that violence is not off the table. These individuals were not just exercising their rights to carry. They had every intention of using those guns if the opportunity arose, meaning that carrying those weapons was meant to communicate a threat. The police responded to that threat by allowing them to carry on without any intervention. What happened to George Floyd is unacceptable, and what's happening now is also unacceptable. We need to take action and hold our leaders accountable and the police accountable. We need to be active advocates for better systems of accountability and better training to ensure these things do not happen anymore. In the description of this video, I've linked to a PDF template that you can use to send a letter to your local police department. Feel free to modify it as you see fit. And you can also contact your state and local representatives to ask them what they are doing to ensure the police do their jobs correctly and safely, treating all citizens fairly. The one thing we have right now is our voices and our votes, and it's time we use them. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a thumbs up, click subscribe, and leave a comment down below. What are your thoughts on the George Floyd tragedy and the protests that have followed? Oh, and as always, enjoy some B-roll of my dog Sugar to brighten your day.